Welcome back to the Lakers Takes podcast. The Lakers have had a pretty eventful week this week. It's been wild. The Lakers are now 16 and 15. They've dealt with injuries. They've dealt with COVID. They've dealt with losses. So let's get right into it. We're going to try to keep up with everything that's happened with the LA Lakers so far this week. First game of the week was Lakers versus Dallas Mavericks, which feels like a month ago, honestly. Back when things felt a little quote-unquote normal, at least for this season, at least for this year. It was a great win. The Lakers won. They won in overtime. The Dallas Mavericks, again, didn't have Luka, but they pretty much had a full roster besides Luka, at least of all the important, impactful players. And it was a good Lakers win. The Lakers were kind of meandering with mediocrity throughout the first half. They really picked it up in that fourth quarter. Fourth quarter and overtime, they had brilliant fourth quarter and a brilliant overtime performance, both offensively and defensively. They were engaged, they were active, they were hardworking. It was a really, really good fourth quarter and closing overtime quarter. They won the game, and one of the most memorable moments of the season happened when Russell Westbrook drove to the lane, kicked it out to Austin Reeves, and Austin Reeves hit his first game-winning three of his young career. The rookie HBK Hillbilly Kobe hits the shot, and the Lakers win. And it was a really fun, awesome win on the road at Dallas. Lakers won, and although they maybe should have dominated more, or you could say they could have played better, hey, they beat a good Dallas team on the road, and HBK got the game-winning three. So it really felt great. I think at this point, we're done dreaming of a game that's going to turn the season around. We understand that's not going to happen. This team's a team that's a couple games above 500 at best, and maybe a 500 team at worst, and we get that. So I think we got a good win. You get a win, and you move on from there and try to improve as you go on, and the Lakers did that with this victory against Dallas. Now, one thing I'm not going to talk about right now, but talk a lot more about later, is COVID. And mainly because the COVID protocols and the things that have been happening with COVID in the NBA, frankly has been really confusing. It's been an ongoing story and a changing story with the close contact and the tracing and all that. It was hard to keep up. And this is what I do. And it was still hard to keep up with who is out, who's in protocol, and who is not going to be available and who came back to become available. So I'm going to kind of gloss over that for now, but we're going to talk about it in the next segment. So right now, let's just kind of stick to the games and who was available to play, because it really ran through the Lakers in the middle of this week, and it's been running through the NBA for a couple weeks now. But let's talk mainly Lakers here. In the Lakers game against the Timberwolves, the Lakers lost 110-92, and this one was a rough loss. This was a rough game. Initially, right away in that first half, Karl Anthony Towns was just cooking the Lakers, just cooking AD specifically. He was being aggressive. He was going, 110%, and it was showing. He had 23 points in that first half alone, and he was dominant. The Timberwolves were up by 9 going into halftime, and even though the deficit was quite large, 9 points at halftime is pretty significant. You're on your way to a blowout if things keep up that way. I felt like, honestly, the Lakers are likely to come back. I felt like, okay, that was some of the worst basketball they could possibly play. That's the Timberwolves' best basketball they could possibly play. I think things are going to balance out. We'll probably have a good third quarter, and then let's rock and roll in that fourth quarter. Let's close this out. Let's close up the 4-6 point deficit, whatever it is, heading into the fourth quarter. Unfortunately, in around the first half of that third quarter, AD was at the top of the key, and a player falls in front of him and kind of rolls on him and rolls underneath the front of his legs, and AD's leg just completely folds over, and you could tell right away it was serious. His knee took an awkward contusion, and then he fell to the ground screaming in pain, and right away you knew, oh no. It reminded me of the LeBron injury last year when a player was diving for the ball and kind of landed on his leg, and it hurt him, took him out for months at a time. Now at first it was just the initial scare, then he got up, he limped a little bit, then he left, and he was trying to walk back through the tunnel, and he had to stop and was in a lot of pain. So it really didn't look good. And that was, for that game, that was ball game. After that, I felt like the Lakers were going to go on a run, but after that, it was clear, okay, no run today. This is over. And it was. Lakers lost 110-92. You didn't really get a great game from many players except for Isaiah Thomas, who, again, he was joining the team on a 10-day due to the hard exemption because of the COVID issues the Lakers were already having with the team. So IT's back. great for IT, and he was balling. He did a great job. He had 19 points off the bench. He was a -1 in the game the Lakers got essentially blown out in. So I think that's really good. As many of you know, I'm not the biggest proponent of plus minus, but when you're -1 in a game that the team lost by a lot and you played a lot, 22 minutes, it's pretty significant. I think that says something. He had a really good game. I think Bazemore was solid. Again, I'm not the biggest Bazemore fan, but he's finally gotten the rotation due to some of the shortcomings the team has in terms of roster. But it really wasn't a great game from anyone else. Pretty pedestrian for everyone else, and of course the Lakers lost. But once AD went down, you kind of knew the game was over because they already were behind. You lose a guy like AD in that kind of shocking way in the third quarter, really hard to overcome that in the mid game. And unfortunately, afterwards, AD got an MRI, and we got bad news. Not the worst news, but we got bad news. And the bad news was that he has an MCL sprain, and he's out for 4 weeks at least. Now, it could have been worse. He could have tore something and be out the whole season and just be gone. So the good news is 4 weeks, okay, let's exaggerate it 2 months. Let's exaggerate it 6 weeks. There's still enough time, theoretically, if he comes back and he's healthy. He can come back and contribute to a championship run. I think that's enough time. You have all of March, some of April. If you have all of February, March, and some of April, I think that's enough to still build the chemistry, especially if the rest of the team stays relatively healthy. So that's a good thing. Remember, last year with the Lakers, AD got hurt and LeBron got hurt, and they didn't really play together again until essentially like game 1 of the play-in. So you don't want that. You need some time together. And if they're able to get, all of February, March, and some of April together, the part of April that's the regular season, I believe that's enough to still do what needs to be done. So the question now is, can they tread water for the next 4 weeks? And that's hard to do with all the COVID stuff, which we're about to get to. But before we do that, let's just talk about the Bulls game, which just happened. Lakers lost to the Bulls 115-110, 5-point deficit. So it wasn't too bad of a loss. Obviously, the Bulls are also going through it with COVID. It's ran through most of their team. So both teams here are a little bit of a shell of themselves. But, that's the current situation that we find both teams under playing this game, which we could argue shouldn't have been played. But we'll talk about that in a moment. LeBron had a really good game, 31 points, 14 rebounds, 6 assists. He was dominant. He continues to push and be the engine of the team, the heart and soul of the team. He had a pretty good game. Russ was mixed. He had 20 points, but he also had 6 turnovers, which is a little too high. In an IT, he had 13 points. He was getting some buckets in early, shot nearly 50% from the field, almost 50% from 3. So he had a good game as well. And Carmelo Anthony, again, 30 minutes, 21 points. The team fought hard. This was a team that fought hard, undermanned, very few traditional starters. The only starter that was really on the court was Russ and LeBron, because DeAndre Jordan is no longer really a starter, at least when everyone's healthy. So you only have 2 main starters. The rotation's all out of whack. Isaiah Thomas joined the team this week. He played 30 minutes. Trevor Ariza has not played all year. He gave you 15. Shawnee Brown gave you 5 minutes. He never really plays at all, right? So there was just there's a lot of depth issues because of COVID, and now COVID mixed with injuries just makes it really, really difficult. So Lakers lost, but it was, I wouldn't say a good loss, but you could tell they were really giving their all, and this is the reality they have with injuries and COVID. It's going to be really, really hard for this team to really get to their best selves and to really put their best foot forward moving on. But hey, that's life sometimes. They're going to have to figure it out. All right, so I hate to do it, and I was hoping I never had to do it, at least for the purposes of this podcast, but the time has come. I can't wait any longer. We have to talk about COVID-19. So, as we know, COVID affected the NBA, has been affecting the NBA for 3 seasons now. They forced the bubble last year, no fans for the majority of the season, and players still were getting COVID throughout the season, here and there. Not that many big outbreaks, but it was still a factor. And this year, it's really running through the league. So, again, just like in our lives, COVID's here to stay, unfortunately, until we either, get immune or until we get to the point where these variants stop, or somehow find some type of cure, something to really eliminate it. But at this point, it's part of our lives, very contagious, very deadly, and just difficult to kind of, live life the way we used to live with this virus out there, mutating and changing. And I don't want to scare people. That's not my intent. I just want to talk basketball. But, basketball is real life, and these are real people, and they live in this world, and they get affected by it. Socially, politically, economically, there's the basketball sports are never just sports. They don't live in a bubble. They live in the context of the world we live in, and they get affected by the same things we get affected by. And unfortunately, COVID-19 falls into that. So we're going to talk a little bit about it, again, from a Lakers perspective, but still, we're going to talk a little bit about the Lakers and COVID, because it finally came to the front door. The chickens came to roost. We've heard a lot of teams being affected. The Bulls have had a lot of infections and had to postpone games. This game got pushed back, in fact, 4 hours to even happen. That was part of the NBA trying to figure things out. And finally, this week was the week where a lot of players got it. Russ almost missed a game because of it. And here's a list of players that are still currently out due to COVID-19 and health and safety protocols. We got Avery Bradley, THT, Dwight Howard, Malik Monk. That's a lot of players. There's only 15 players on your team, plus your two-way guys. And also add to that the fact that Trevor Ariza hasn't played a game, and Kendrick Nunn hasn't played a game, at least until Trevor Ariza's first game was Sunday. But before that, he hasn't played a game all season. So the Lakers normally only have 13 guys. If 4 players have COVID, that puts it down to 9 players. You need 8 to actually play a game of basketball with some kind of bench that the NBA would allow. They were already kind of getting close to that limit, which is why you saw them bring in Isaiah Thomas as a 10-day player on an exemption because of the hardship of COVID-19. And that's been an issue. And that affects the team so much because so many players were out. We have announcers out. Billy Mack's out because of that. Frank Vogel got COVID. He's out. We had Fizdale coaching the Lakers on Sunday against the Bulls. So it's just a lot. It's been a lot of trauma. It's been a lot of shock. It has to be tough on the players to know, wait, he's in. Russ is out? Oh, no, Russ is in. Oh, Avery's out. Oh, okay, IT's coming in? Okay, he's joining the team? Cool. Coach is out. Okay, who's our coach? It's just a lot. And I don't want to make excuses for the players. Your losses are your losses. But it's just hard, one, to win games when you're missing 4 players due to COVID and 2 due to injury. And it's really hard to win when, you have all that happening on the fly and changing on the fly as well. So, hopefully they can get through this next week or so and kind of at least start getting back some of these players. But, I personally, I think the NBA's done a really rough, bad job with this so far this week. I think, the smart thing would have been let's cancel games for 10 days. Let's get these numbers down to 0, and then we can maybe start again. And instead, they're trying to kind of make it happen, and you got these exemptions, but all these stars are out. You got the Lakers with all these players out. Kevin Durant got it, Kyrie got it. He just joined, he got it. Trae Young just got it. These numbers keep evolving and changing every 5 minutes. Someone probably got it and just got announced to having it by the time I'm recording this podcast. It's just been crazy. I think the numbers 15% of the league has gotten it. And again, it's a contagious disease you can't see. It just gets out of control. So the NBA needs to do something better. Right now, Shams Charania actually just tweeted out that the NBA will allow teams to sign 1 replacement player for each of its players who are under contract and test positive for COVID-19, effective immediately through January 19th. Another thing is now all players who are two-way players who previously had 50 game max now have no limit on the number of games they can appear in. That's good for the NBA trying to kind of find enough players to play in these games. But again, I think that's still not really solving the problem. We need to stop things for a moment, catch our breath, and then we can go ahead and begin again. But this is just getting a little too rough, and it's almost uncomfortable to my liking to force these players to play and force these teams to play. What are we learning by having half the Brooklyn Nets out against half the Cleveland Cavaliers out? Just to throw a couple teams out there. What are we really gaining from watching that product that way? It doesn't help anybody to see that kind of play, and it doesn't help the teams get better. It's not an entertaining game. You're not learning if the Brooklyn Nets have what it takes to win a championship, because the players that have COVID won't have COVID for another 2 weeks. And it's just money. It's just broadcasting rights and money, and that's pretty despicable, honestly. And it's the first time in my life I've actually felt almost guilty. I almost felt like it was immoral to watch this game. And I've never felt that way watching a basketball game. It's a basketball game. Just watching a basketball game. Having fun, covering it. It's joy. And today was one of the first times I've ever felt like, kind of feels like I'm helping be complicit in the, process of the NBA creating what it's creating here by by watching this game. I still watched it, but I'm almost at my limit here. So that's not good because I'm one of the most intense basketball fans, if you will, covering the sport and caring about the sport so much. If I'm at that point, there's probably other people who are going to be at that point as well. So that's another thing they need to think about. Do the responsible thing. Just cancel games for a week. Let's get these numbers down, and then we can begin again. Because what we really want to see is what we never can see, which is ideal circumstances where everyone's healthy, everyone's good, and the games can be fair, and we can find out who the best teams are when everyone goes one-on-one, team by team. Of course, we know that's never even actually true because there's variables like injuries, variables like refs. We never really get that 2K experience, but we're really far away with this. We're like really far away. And that needs to kind of, we need to find a way to get it closer to fair. And this is not fair at all. It feels like anything can randomly happen. It's very unfair. So we'll see what the NBA does. Hopefully they can get better instead of just trying to ignore these things. But I don't know. It's looking rough right now. So I'm hopeful that we can get healthier and that maybe we can have a short pause here at some point just to try to reset and get ready till we can have a good season. Like last year was pretty good, but again, we have new variants now and they're definitely running through the league. So I hope Silver and the rest of the powers that be think about this as they have these conversations because it's very serious. And right now, from a Lakers perspective, they're pretty decimated. They're using two-way players. They're using exempt guys on 10-day contracts. It's rough, and it's going to be rough. And then now they also are now missing AD, period, for a month. So it's going to be a really tough time for the Lakers. If they can stay above 500, that'd be great. But it's going to be the season just got very difficult for the Lakers. And speaking of that, let's go into this week's game. So again, Tuesday, rough game. They're playing the Phoenix Suns on Tuesday. Phoenix, who's just got their star Devin Booker back, so that's going to be a challenge. And then the Lakers play the San Antonio Spurs on Thursday at 7:30. And on Christmas Day, the big game, Lakers play the Brooklyn Nets. So we'll see what happens in these three games here. I think winning one, maybe two. I really can't see them going on a 3-game winning streak here again, at least not in this with this current roster. So it's going to be a challenge here for the Lakers to kind of stay afloat. We were hoping, for a turnaround, but with AD out and then these COVID-19 issues the team is facing, I think it's a long shot. So we'll see what happens, but that's the next 3 games. They got Tuesday against Phoenix, Thursday against the Spurs, and then Friday against the Brooklyn Nets. And these games are happening at Staples, and Crypto.com. First crypto game will be against the Brooklyn Nets on Christmas Day. So it'll be interesting to see what changes the team makes to the stadium and how that begins to change. But a new era is starting, and it's starting under dire circumstances for the Lakers. But we'll see what happens. And regardless of what happens, I'll be here to cover it. I'll be here to talk about it. And I'll be looking forward and hoping that the Lakers get healthy, hoping the Lakers can get through this COVID situation, and hoping the Lakers win some games. So we'll see what happens with the Lakers this week, and we'll talk about it next week. So I'll talk to you then. Peace.